The day everything changed started like any other ordinary Monday. I remember standing by the coffee machine, listening to the soft hum of the office, and feeling a strange sense of satisfaction. My name is Emily Grant, I'm 34, and I've spent the last 10 years climbing the corporate ladder at Westfield Enterprises. I had worked my way up from a junior analyst to the manager of a key department, and my life, on the surface, seemed perfect. My team respected me, my colleagues trusted me, and for once, I felt that my career was finally stable. But stability, I would soon learn, is just a fragile illusion. At first, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. My office was buzzing with emails, meetings were scheduled back-to-back, and I had just closed a contract that would have earned our division significant revenue. I was proud of the work I'd done, of the long nights and early mornings I'd sacrificed to reach this point. And yet, there was always someone hovering in the shadows, quietly observing. Someone whose presence made the air a little heavier, the atmosphere just a little tense. That someone was Chloe, the CEO's niece. She had recently joined the company, fresh out of business school, and everyone whispered that she was being groomed for a high-level position. On the surface, Chloe was polite, even charming, her smile could light up a room, but her eyes were calculating. I had seen that look before in people who wanted more than what they had earned. I didn't pay it much attention at first, after all, she was family, and I told myself not to let office politics cloud my judgment. Life outside of work seemed equally serene. I lived in a small apartment downtown, where I could enjoy my evenings alone, decompressing from the chaos of corporate life. My friends often joked that I was too dedicated to my job, but I didn't mind. For me, career satisfaction was deeply intertwined with self-worth. My weekends were filled with quiet dinners, long walks, and the occasional book club meeting. Everything seemed calm, almost idyllic. Then came the subtle signs, little things that most people would dismiss but that set my instincts on edge. Chloe would coincidentally show up in my department just as I finished presenting a report, asking questions that seemed innocent but were pointed, almost invasive. She praised my work, but in a way that felt like she was cataloging every success I had, as if preparing for a future where she would claim it as her own. I noticed her linger around my desk, watching, taking notes, or so it seemed. My first thought was, maybe I'm overthinking this. But something deep in my gut whispered otherwise. One morning, the office felt different. I had just settled into my chair when my supervisor, Mr. Patterson, called me into his office. I could sense the tension immediately. He handed me a document with a sympathetic smile. "Emily," he said carefully, "we need you to consider stepping aside temporarily. The board has decided to give Chloe an accelerated opportunity. It's for the good of the company." My heart sank. I read the words over and over, unable to grasp that I was being asked, subtly but unmistakably, to hand over my hard-earned position to someone barely 6 months out of school. I wanted to laugh, to cry, to scream, but instead, I managed a polite nod and left the office, my hands trembling. Walking back to my desk, I felt a whirlwind of emotions. Anger, disbelief, confusion, and a bitter taste of betrayal. All those late nights, all those sacrifices, suddenly seemed meaningless. And yet, as much as I wanted to lash out, I knew that the office was not the place for an emotional confrontation. I had to think, to plan, to survive. Because something deep down told me that this was just the beginning, and that the storm was far from over. I tried to act normal, to keep up appearances, because no one could know just how furious I was. I smiled at Chloe when she passed by, nodding politely, while my mind raced with questions. How could she, with all her charm and naivety, think she could waltz into a position I had fought for over a decade? How could my supervisors, people I trusted, so easily dismiss my contributions? The office hum continued, oblivious to the brewing tension, and I realized that no one was going to save me. If I wanted justice, or revenge, I would have to do it myself. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the ceiling, replaying the day's events in my mind. I thought about every moment of my career, every late night, every achievement that had earned me respect and authority. And then, a plan began to form, a way to reclaim what was mine, to turn the tables on those who underestimated me. I didn't know how yet, but one thing was certain: I was not going to disappear quietly. I was not going to let Chloe, or anyone else, take what I had built. The story of betrayal, cunning, and ultimate revenge had begun. And little did Chloe know, in 6 months' time, it would be she who would tremble in my shadow. The following weeks were a nightmare in slow motion. Every morning, I walked into the office with a tight knot in my stomach, knowing that Chloe's presence was a constant shadow over everything I did. At first, she didn't openly challenge me. She smiled sweetly, asked innocent questions, and offered help in ways that seemed harmless. But the feeling in my gut told me otherwise. Something was off, and I couldn't shake it. It started with little things. Files I had meticulously organized would be moved or accidentally deleted. Meetings I scheduled were suddenly changed, with Chloe conveniently included in every discussion, often steering the conversation in her favor. One morning, I discovered that an important client had received a misdirected email, one that made it appear as if I had overlooked their needs. Chloe had smiled when she walked past my desk, looking innocent, but I knew better. Every action, every gesture, seemed calculated to destabilize me, to create doubt in my abilities. Despite the warning signs, I tried to stay professional, to maintain the calm that had always been my armor. I told myself that maybe I was imagining things, that perhaps Chloe truly was just eager and enthusiastic. I even confided in a colleague, Sarah, hoping for reassurance. "You're overthinking it," she said with a nervous laugh. "She's new, she's ambitious. Don't let it get to you." But deep down, I knew ambition alone didn't explain the subtle manipulations, the quiet undermining. Something darker was at play. The first major alarm came during a strategy meeting. I had spent weeks preparing a presentation that would highlight my team's achievements and secure an upcoming promotion. I walked in confident, only to find Chloe sitting at the head of the table, smiling at the executives as if she had planned this moment all along. Midway through my presentation, she interrupted, not aggressively, but with enough casual charm to redirect attention to her own ideas. My carefully constructed points were drowned in her confident assertions. By the time I finished, I felt humiliated, unsure if anyone noticed that she had stolen the spotlight. The subtle nods and smiles from some of the executives only made my stomach churn. It was a quiet coup, but a coup nonetheless. Then came the whispers. Rumors started circulating, small, insidious comments questioning my leadership, my decisions, even my dedication. Chloe's friends within the company made sure that these rumors reached the right ears, painting me as stubborn, difficult, and resistant to change. I caught glimpses of these conversations in the break room, the cafeteria, and even during casual hallway chats. My colleagues who once supported me seemed hesitant, polite but distant, unsure where their loyalties should lie. Every interaction became a minefield, each smile hiding suspicion. The breaking point, however, came unexpectedly. One Friday afternoon, I received an urgent message from HR, summoning me to a private office. Heart racing, I followed the instructions, and there I was handed a document outlining a voluntary reassignment opportunity for Chloe. The letter implied that my role could be modified temporarily to accommodate the company's long-term vision. Essentially, they wanted me out of my position so Chloe could take the lead. The words blurred before my eyes. They were phrased politely, almost bureaucratically, but the message was unmistakable: step aside, or be forced out. I left HR with trembling hands, my mind spinning. I wanted to confront Chloe immediately, to scream, to demand justice, but I couldn't. There were cameras, witnesses, and the delicate politics of a corporation that moved slowly but with lethal precision. I walked back to my desk, my mind racing with anger and disbelief. How dare they? How dare anyone assume that I would quietly surrender my position, my authority, my career? Every fiber of my being screamed to fight, but I had to be strategic. Impulsiveness would only play into their hands. Over the next few days, I started observing Chloe even more carefully. Every gesture, every casual remark, every moment she smiled at executives or colleagues became evidence in my mind of her manipulations. She was clever, but not flawless. I noticed inconsistencies in her work, moments where she overreached and left gaps that could be exploited. Each small mistake, each slip, was a potential foothold for me to reclaim control. I realized then that surviving this storm wouldn't be about confrontation, it would be about patience, calculation, and timing. I began documenting everything. Emails, meeting notes, calendar invitations, everything was meticulously saved. I knew that when the time came, I needed a clear, undeniable trail of her manipulations and incompetence. At the same time, I strengthened my own position by quietly reinforcing relationships with colleagues who respected my work. I didn't boast or hint at my plan, I simply let my consistent performance speak for itself. In the shadows of the office, a quiet war was brewing, and I was preparing for the moment when the balance would shift. Then, as if testing me, Chloe made a misstep. She overpromised on a small client project, confident that her charm would cover any shortcomings. Predictably, the project ran into complications, and her mismanagement was apparent to anyone paying attention. I stepped in subtly, offering solutions without drawing direct attention to her errors. Executives noticed the improvement, and whispers began to shift. Slowly, the narrative started to tilt. People who had doubted me began to see that I still had control, that experience and competence couldn't be easily replaced. By the end of this week, I realized something crucial. This wasn't just a power struggle, it was a test. Chloe and those who supported her underestimated me, assuming I would crumble or comply. But in reality, every challenge, every insult, every subtle undermining only strengthened my resolve. I didn't just want my position back, I wanted to reclaim it in a way that left no doubt about who truly belonged at the top. And so, the game had officially begun. I was no longer a passive participant, I was a player. I didn't yet know how the endgame would unfold, but I knew that patience, cunning, and meticulous planning were my greatest weapons. The office, once a familiar and safe place, had transformed into a battleground, and I was ready to fight. The tension was palpable, the stakes higher than ever. Every glance from Chloe, every nod from the executives, every murmur in the hallways was now part of a larger puzzle. And while she believed she was inching toward victory, I quietly prepared the counter-strike that would, in time, turn the tables completely. The weeks that followed were a mix of quiet tension and explosive incidents. Chloe's audacity grew daily. She started taking credit for my ideas, casually referencing projects I had spent months perfecting, and presenting them to executives as if they were her own. I watched, seething, as her charm and seemingly endless energy won over some of my colleagues. Every smile she threw at the higher-ups, every casual joke, felt like a dagger twisting in my side. Then came the ultimate shock. One Monday morning, I arrived at the office to find an official email waiting for me. I had been reassigned a polite corporate euphemism for being sidelined. The notice made it sound like a temporary, necessary adjustment, but there was no mistaking the intent. Chloe was officially taking over my responsibilities, with my support role reduced to minor administrative tasks. I read the email 3 times, my hands trembling, my chest tight with a mixture of anger, disbelief, and helplessness. It felt like the floor had fallen beneath me. Years of dedication, of sleepless nights and sacrifices, all dismissed in a few calculated paragraphs. I wanted to yell, to throw my computer across the room, but I knew any outburst would only confirm the narrative they wanted, that I was emotional, incapable, and replaceable. So, I forced myself to breathe, to sit down, and to think. Chloe didn't stop there. She made subtle, deliberate moves to further undermine me. Meetings were scheduled without my knowledge. Decisions I had made were questioned in front of my team. Colleagues who had once respected me seemed wary, hesitant to approach me. Rumors swirled, quiet whispers that I was resistant to change, too old-fashioned, or difficult to work with. Every word felt like poison, designed to isolate me. Even my closest allies began to hesitate, unsure if they should openly support me. Yet amid this chaos, a flicker of opportunity appeared. While reviewing reports that Chloe had submitted in my absence, I noticed a series of inconsistencies. Numbers didn't match up, deadlines had been ignored, and certain client requests were left unresolved. It was subtle, easily overlooked by anyone not paying close attention, but to me, it was a crack in her armor. Chloe wasn't flawless. She had underestimated the importance of detail, and that mistake would become my first leverage point. That night, I stayed late in the office, combing through spreadsheets, emails, and project notes. Every error Chloe had made, every misstep, I meticulously recorded. I knew that confronting her head-on now would be premature. I needed evidence, undeniable proof that would demonstrate her incompetence to the people who mattered most. And more importantly, I needed to remain calm, composed, and utterly unassailable while doing it. Meanwhile, Chloe continued to celebrate her perceived victories. She flaunted her successes to executives, subtly belittled my contributions in team meetings, and even invited colleagues to lunches where she whispered gossip about me. I observed everything silently, making mental notes of every misstatement, every overreach. Every interaction she had was a potential entry point into the dossier I was building. The pressure was relentless. Each morning, I entered the office under a cloud of tension, knowing that Chloe's eyes were on me, and that every word, every gesture, would be scrutinized. It was exhausting, frustrating, and deeply infuriating, but it was also sharpening my focus. I realized that I could not allow emotion to dictate my actions. Patience and precision were my allies now. Then, an unexpected encounter changed everything. One afternoon, while checking the shared project folder, I discovered an email Chloe had accidentally CC'd to the wrong person, an internal note outlining her mismanagement of a key client account. She had been careless, thinking no one outside her immediate circle would see it. But there it was, plain as day, a clear trail of negligence, overpromising, and miscommunication that directly contradicted her polished front. My heart raced. This was it, the first tangible proof that her rise was not only unearned but fraught with mistakes she hadn't anticipated. I knew this small victory was just the beginning, but it gave me the confidence I needed. I began to carefully map out a plan to expose her incompetence and regain my rightful position. The next day, I acted subtly. I offered to assist Chloe on a critical client review, framing it as support rather than intervention. She welcomed it, unaware that I was closely monitoring every move, every email, and every decision. Within hours, her previous mistakes began to create visible problems for the client. Delays, miscommunications, and missed deadlines piled up. The executives, previously impressed by Chloe's charm, started asking questions, quietly at first, then more pointedly. It was a tense dance. I had to remain friendly, composed, and professional, all while letting the evidence of her mistakes accumulate naturally. Every small misstep she made was a step toward my eventual comeback. I smiled in meetings, nodded in agreement, and maintained the illusion that I was adapting to my new role. But behind that composed exterior, my mind was racing, cataloging everything that could be used to dismantle her credibility. By the end of the week, it was undeniable, Chloe was unraveling. Minor errors had snowballed into client dissatisfaction, and whispers of concern were circulating among the executives. And I had remained calm, methodical, and patient, quietly documenting every failure and every moment of arrogance that would later serve as proof of her unsuitability for leadership. In that moment, I realized that patience was my secret weapon. Chloe had rushed ahead, relying on charm and audacity, assuming that my restraint was weakness. But restraint had allowed me to see clearly, to gather evidence, and to prepare for the day when I would strike back. And strike back I would, because I wasn't just going to reclaim my position, I was going to do it in a way that left no doubt who truly deserved it. The stage was set. Chloe believed she was untouchable, basking in the illusion of her victory. I, meanwhile, had begun to craft a strategy that would turn her overconfidence into her downfall. The slow, meticulous process of gathering proof, observing weaknesses, and setting traps had begun, and the first cracks in her facade were already visible. The following weeks felt like a chess game, with every move carefully calculated. I didn't just want my old position back, I wanted to ensure that Chloe could never undermine me again. The evidence I had gathered wasn't just numbers and emails, it was a story of negligence, arrogance, and poor judgment that she had written herself, unaware that I was quietly compiling it all. I began to subtly expose her mistakes in meetings. At first, I framed it as helpful observations or supportive notes, never making it seem like an attack. Chloe, confident and oblivious, dismissed them with a smile, thinking she was untouchable. But each comment I made planted a seed of doubt among our colleagues. Executives started asking questions: why was this task delayed? Or could you clarify these numbers? And Chloe stumbled, trying to cover her errors. One critical day, I received an internal memo from a client Chloe had been managing. They were frustrated, citing missed deadlines and inconsistent communication. The memo was polite, professional, but firm, enough to make any executive sit up and pay attention. I knew this was my opening. I carefully printed the memo, along with my compiled list of errors, and prepared a detailed presentation for the leadership team. Every email, spreadsheet, and note was organized to show a clear picture of Chloe's mismanagement. I invited Chloe to a collaborative review in the conference room. She arrived with her usual confidence, unaware that the meeting was anything but ordinary. As soon as the executives were seated, I calmly began my presentation, highlighting the discrepancies in her reports, the missed deadlines, and the client complaints. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse her. I simply presented the facts, letting the evidence speak for itself. Chloe's smile faltered. She tried to interject, to explain away minor mistakes, but I had anticipated every excuse. Every response she gave was contradicted by emails, timelines, and notes she had left in her own words. The executives leaned forward, scrutinizing the documents, and for the first time, Chloe realized that her polished facade was crumbling. I watched silently as the room shifted. Colleagues who had hesitated to support me earlier were now nodding subtly, exchanging looks that confirmed what I already knew: the tide was turning. Chloe's overconfidence had blinded her to the meticulous planning I had invested in this moment. Every careless action, every shortcut she had taken, had built the foundation for her undoing. By the end of the presentation, the decision was clear. Chloe was reassigned, permanently, to a role with far less responsibility, under close supervision. My previous position was reinstated, but not as it had been. I was promoted, officially recognized for my leadership, and given full authority over the projects Chloe had attempted to claim. It was a vindication, not just professionally, but personally. The quiet power I had exercised, the patience and careful observation, had led to a triumph that words alone couldn't describe. The aftermath was immediate. Chloe, once a force of confidence, was now isolated. She avoided eye contact in meetings, her charm ineffective against the mountain of evidence I had presented. Colleagues who had once feared offending her now approached me with gratitude and respect. The balance of power had shifted completely, and I felt a sense of liberation I hadn't experienced in months. But the victory wasn't just about regaining my position, it was about reclaiming control over my life and career. I implemented stricter protocols, streamlined communication channels, and made sure that no one could manipulate the system to their advantage again. The lessons I had learned during those difficult months, patience, observation, and strategic thinking, became integral to my leadership style. And there was an unexpected bonus. Watching Chloe struggle to regain her footing was profoundly satisfying. Not through cruelty, but through justice. She had underestimated me, and that miscalculation cost her credibility, respect, and power. It was a reminder that integrity, competence, and diligence could triumph over arrogance, shortcuts, and entitlement. As the weeks turned into months, I settled into my new role with confidence. My team respected me, my leadership was effective, and the office atmosphere shifted from tension to collaboration. Chloe, now relegated to minor responsibilities, seemed to fade into the background, a cautionary example rather than a looming threat. I took a quiet satisfaction in the knowledge that I had achieved this without compromising my professionalism. Every smile, every polite word, every strategic observation had been part of a calculated plan that had brought justice to a situation where power and nepotism had threatened to dominate. I had learned not just to survive, but to thrive, turning a potentially devastating setback into the platform for my ultimate success. In the end, the lesson was clear: patience, planning, and precision were more powerful than haste and arrogance. Chloe's downfall was not a product of my malice. It was the natural consequence of her own overconfidence and lack of diligence. And I, having weathered the storm, emerged not only as the rightful leader but as a stronger, wiser, and more resilient person. The day after the board meeting, a sense of calm finally settled over the office. I could walk through the halls without feeling the heavy weight of scrutiny, the quiet fear of being undermined at every turn. Chloe, once so dominant and condescending, now moved like a ghost through the space she had once controlled. It was astonishing how quickly respect and authority shifted when truth and competence aligned. I spent the morning reviewing the projects that had been stalled under Chloe's watch. Each delay, each mismanaged task, now presented an opportunity to demonstrate my capabilities. With focused energy, I reorganized teams, reassigned responsibilities, and implemented transparent reporting systems. It wasn't about revenge, it was about excellence, efficiency, and setting a standard that could not be ignored. The office buzzed with renewed purpose. My colleagues were eager to follow a leader who not only understood the work but had endured and overcome adversity to prove her worth. Chloe attempted to regain her footing, sending emails and requests to assert some control, but the responses she received were firm and procedural. Every action she took was filtered through the systems I had established. Slowly, her influence waned, and her frustration became visible. It was not in my nature to gloat, but witnessing the consequences of her arrogance and entitlement was undeniably satisfying. She had underestimated me at every turn, and each misstep had contributed to her own downfall. In those quiet moments between meetings, I reflected on how far I had come. 6 months ago, I was on the verge of losing my career, forced to step aside to make way for nepotism. My confidence had been shaken, my contributions dismissed, and my future seemed uncertain. Yet, through patience, careful observation, and strategic action, I had transformed the threat into an opportunity. I hadn't just reclaimed my position, I had expanded it. I was no longer just a manager, I was a leader in every sense of the word. The satisfaction wasn't limited to professional victory. There was a deeper sense of personal triumph. I had learned to trust my instincts, to act with precision, and to value resilience above all else. Chloe's downfall was a testament to the power of consistency, diligence, and strategic thinking. Every small victory I had secured, every observation noted, every piece of evidence gathered, culminated in this moment of justice. As the weeks passed, my leadership style evolved. I became more proactive, more engaged with my team, and more transparent in communication. Mistakes were addressed quickly, successes celebrated collaboratively, and no one could manipulate or bypass protocols without being noticed. My colleagues began to see me not only as a capable leader but as someone who had earned authority through perseverance and integrity. Respect was no longer demanded, it was naturally given. Chloe, on the other hand, struggled to adapt. Her confidence, once unshakable, had been replaced with caution and insecurity. Opportunities that once seemed effortless now required effort she wasn't willing to invest. Slowly, she faded from the center of attention, a shadow of the person who had once believed she could control everything. Watching her decline was a reminder of the consequences of arrogance and entitlement, but I never let it cloud my own achievements. I focused on growth, not revenge, on leadership, not petty satisfaction. The experience taught me invaluable lessons. First, resilience is a weapon more powerful than anger. The more you endure, observe, and plan, the greater your eventual victory. Second, patience and strategic thinking can outmatch impulsiveness and overconfidence. Third, true leadership isn't about asserting dominance, it's about earning respect through competence, fairness, and vision. Finally, integrity matters. I could have cut corners, reacted in haste, or sought personal vendettas, but my success was all the sweeter because it was built on professionalism and careful planning. As I looked around the office one late afternoon, I felt a profound sense of accomplishment. Projects were on track, the team was motivated, and I had restored not only my career but also my sense of purpose. The fear and uncertainty that had haunted me months ago were gone. In their place was confidence, clarity, and the knowledge that I could face challenges head-on and emerge stronger. Before leaving that day, I took a moment to reflect on what had made this journey possible: observation, planning, patience, and an unwavering belief in my own abilities. The obstacles, setbacks, and even Chloe's manipulations had all been opportunities in disguise, lessons that forced me to grow, adapt, and assert myself with authority. I had turned a potentially devastating situation into the foundation for my ultimate success. To anyone watching this story, remember this: obstacles can become opportunities, setbacks can become setups for victory, and patience combined with strategy can transform any challenge into triumph. Sometimes, the people who seem strongest are simply the ones who haven't faced the consequences of their own arrogance yet. And now, as I continue to lead my team, I do so with a sense of purpose and clarity that I had never experienced before. Chloe's shadow no longer looms over my career, instead, my own light shines brighter, a beacon of resilience, strategy, and integrity. I am proof that patience, intelligence, and steadfast determination can turn any forced resignation into a rise to power. If you've faced betrayal, manipulation, or challenges that seemed insurmountable, take heart. The key isn't immediate retaliation, it's careful observation, strategic planning, and maintaining your own integrity. The ultimate victory will be sweeter, lasting, and undeniable. And if you've enjoyed this story and want more tales of resilience, strategy, and ultimate triumph, don't forget to subscribe to At True Moments Life, share your thoughts in the comments below, and hit the like button to support more real-life stories of strength and comeback.